Me and Tiz are burnt to a crisp. We went to the beach yesterday before UFC 317, and I think me and you are more red than Charles Oliveira's face before he got knocked out in the main event. It was in different spots
Damn,
though.
dude.
I know
Yeah.
your area is like the back, I think, and mine is mainly like my face, some of my neck, and my feet because I'm an idiot and I forgot to put sunscreen on my feet. Dude, it's so funny. Like, obviously, you guys can't see on camera, but my feet are red. It is bad. But you guys don't give a shit about our sunburn, I'm sure. So let's talk about UFC 317 because that was the main story about Saturday night. And the main thing is, I mean, UFC 317 was a banger. I love that event from start to finish, at least like from when we started watching it, obviously. I think we started pretty much like right after the first couple of fights. That was when we were on our way back. And so we were watching it in the car. Uh, and I ended up watching all the fights basically from where we started after. Um, but I think, you have to just start with how awesome that main event was with Ilia Topuria versus Charles Oliveira. Ilia Topuria makes history, becoming the first person to win titles in two different UFC weight divisions while remaining undefeated. Knocks out Charles Oliveira in the first round with honestly one of the most beautiful combinations I think I've ever seen finish a title fight. I mean, dude, the way Ilya fainted to the body with the jab and then came up to the head and then hit him with another jab to the body. So then when Oliveira kind of like changed his guard and kind of put his head down, and then he cased because Oliveira was still coming forward, and then Topuria hit him with that left, right, left, and that was a wrap at that point. And I said this to you last week. Anybody could see, like my whole point with this, and I love Charles Oliveira, but stylistically from the get go, I was like, this is a tough matchup for him because Charles Oliveira is a guy who gets hit a lot in the early part of fights, and he's been hit by a lot of guys with a lot of power, so you can't ever really count him out. But I'm like, Ilia Topuria's boxing is so crisp and technically sound. I'm like, if he hits Oliveira with just a couple of those shots clean, he's going to end up like Max Holloway and Alexander Volkanovski, and that's exactly what ended up happening. And just the run that this dude has been on lately with Topuria. I mean, you got Volk, Holloway, Oliveira, all knocked out one after another, and not TKOs, knockouts, just clean knockouts. This dude is on another level right now, and I feel like we're witnessing greatness. Like we're in the midst of it right now, and I'm really excited to see where Ilya goes from here at lightweight. But in terms of the fight itself, what did you think of it?
Everyone watching, it doesn't matter how long you've been watching UFC, to be honest, either. This is one of those big fight feels already knowing that there's a title on the line, but you have a main event that could main event any card, no matter how big or special UFC is trying to make the card. So UFC 300, for instance, if this was the main event, I know me and you aren't complaining. I'm sure a lot of true fight fans are not complaining whatsoever. But once the fight actually happens and you get the result that you do, so I mean, if you put away, everyone's got that soft spot for Charles Oliveira, and maybe if you put away any bias or whatnot, and you just look at it from an objective lens, you kind of see already a guy in Ilya who looks like he's been fighting as a lightweight this entire time. So the fact that this is his very first fight in the division and he's got a former champion across from him who is best has the best grappler, because now that Islam is out of the division, the best grappler in the division as well, and to just school him like that and not let him get into his wheelhouse whatsoever. It was one of those fights where if if you were trying to make like a super accurate prediction for it, to make a case for Ilya as to why he would beat Charles Oliveira, then I think he fought this fight exactly to a T. So let's say this was the game plan all along, and I mean, obviously he envisions a finish no matter what, but to make it look that easy is a whole nother kind of level, I think, for any fighter. Doesn't matter who you are. John Jones, Pereira, Conor McGregor, that guy across from you is still very much qualified and deserving to be in that cage with you and have that same opportunity at the title. So yeah, that was. I don't think there was really any room for that fight to go, like, where you would say like, man, that was super underwhelming. Even with Charles Oliveira, not really seemingly just looking totally overwhelmed. It's just that's more of a testament to Ilia Topuria at this point, because nobody hits as hard as this guy in all of UFC.
That's what I mean. Like, I think it seems like even when he's at featherweight, like, they all know he has power, but it seems like when he's actually in the cage with these guys and then he cracks them clean for that first time, you see like a shift in the way that the guys fight him, because they're like, oh, like, if I get hit with another one of those, like, it might be over. And the thing with Ilia too that I always think about and really was apparent in this fight is just like the level of confidence that this guy has is just unreal, because a lot of people say he's overconfident or he's cocky, but like, how cocky is he if he's actually following through on what he's saying? Because he said all week, I'm going to knock Charles Oliveira out in the first round. And everybody's like, I mean, yeah, I guess he's the favorite, but nobody really thought that like it was going to be that easy. And then he goes in there and does this. And he said the same thing when he fought Volk and when he fought Holloway, and nobody believed him. And he does the same thing. You know, this guy, is it really overconfidence when he's actually doing it? You know what I mean? Like, I'm really impressed by the confidence that Ilia Topuria has in and outside of the cage, because I think that really does a number for him. How many people... No one's done that to Charles Oliveira. Not in this era. You know, maybe in the past when Charles wasn't as good as he was now.
Yeah,
that was
he's
unbelievable.
playing out a real-life UFC 5 my career right now.
Yeah, he's going to have to fight Charles another, like, 4 times, though. The UFC... I haven't played the latest UFC game, but all the UFC games before that, like, what always happens is, you know, you'll win the title, you'll go double champ and all that, and then, like, they don't know how to have, like, accurate fighter progression, so then you end up just fighting the same 3 guys, like, 5 times. It's like, Charles Oliveira is back, fighting for the title for the 3rd time. He's 46 years old. They're all like Yoel Romero. But, yeah, I agree, man. I mean, Ilia Topuria, his UFC career, I mean, it's quite literally been flawless so far when you think of all the guys he's starched in the way that he has. Honestly, the more I think about it, like, when he fought Josh Emmett, and Josh Emmett, like, actually lasted all 5 rounds, how did he do that? Like, can you think about it? Like, Volk got knocked out, Holloway, now Oliveira. Josh Emmett deserves a lot of credit for actually going the distance with this guy. Mm-hmm. Because Topuria is just a killer in there, man. He's already an all-time great in my eyes. I don't know how far up that list you want to bring him, but it's just like, even if you look at his last 3 fights, it's just... When have we seen a run like this besides the greats?
Amongst all the champions right now in UFC, with John Jones being retired and Alex Pereira no longer being the champ, I think this is the one guy you can truly count on to finish every single fight. Every single time he's defending the belt. Or in this case, competing for the belt.
Don't forget I got Tommy Aspinall though. He's another.
Yeah,
one. Technically,
fair.
Statistically,
it's been
he
so
might be.
long, obviously, you know.
Yeah.
And then obviously
that's
Tom,
other. Yeah, that's out of his hands though.
Exactly. Tom he's the heavyweight champ, so I mean they don't make a heavyweight champ that that's going the deep waters every single time. But amongst all the champions right now in UFC, Ilia Topuria is the one true guy that you just know that you can bet on to finish every single time. Yeah, and I feel pretty good about that, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, it was an outstanding performance. There's really not much else to say there. I mean, technically, in terms of his boxing, obviously it's so clean. You don't need me and you to tell you guys that. And, you know, in terms of what's next, obviously Ilia Topuria and Paddy Pimblett, they've had a lot of beef in the past. They faced off in the cage. Didn't seem like Dana White liked that too much, mostly because unless he was just trying to no-sell it, I think that he probably feels the same way that a lot of fans feel. You know, even though Patty has obviously looked really impressive as of late, I still think that there's a couple of people ahead of him in terms of who deserves a title fight next. You know, Arman Tsarukyan was obviously talking after this fight. Justin Gaethje is also out there, and I think that he's a guy who you can never really rule out in terms of the title picture. Uh, and yeah, I just still think that Patty probably needs one more win. It'll sell if and when those guys fight, but I don't know if right now is the time to make it. And I think that that's kind of why Dana White seemed to have a lack of enthusiasm for it. That's just my opinion personally, but
when the pound for pound rankings update on Tuesday, where do you think Ilia Topuria is going to sit at?
Well, where is he now? That's a good question. Let me see where he's at now. Of course, the one time I don't have the UFC rankings pulled up.
Because in terms of...
Topuria's third, and ahead of him is Merab and Islam. Damn, I don't know. I mean, I think you put him above Merab. You have to, just because it's a second weight division that he has a belt in. And Islam right now, Islam's not the champ, so it's like, do you still keep Islam as pound for pound number one to sell the fight with JDM, or do you like? Because it's not like Islam isn't active. You know what I mean? I get that he's not the lightweight champion right now, but still, I think that...
Well, maybe that should play a role into, because if you think about it like this, then if Islam fights JDM, and wherever JDM is right now in the pound for pound rankings... Seventh, okay, so there's no way Patty can fight Ilia Topuria next.
I just don't see it. It doesn't make any... to me, if you beat... Like, Michael Chandler's a great fighter, obviously, but, you know, I don't think beating Michael Chandler gets you a title shot. Not in today's lightweight division. And Paddy Pimblett, it's not... He's ranked number 8. So, like, you look at all the guys ahead of him. Like I said, I think Tsarukyan is a guy who deserves it probably the most. Gaethje right behind him.
Yeah, eight's pretty
even Dan
good,
Hooker. Dan Hooker's ranked ahead of him.
Yeah, you have people above you, so
yeah,
there you go.
And like Beneil Dariush is ranked number 9 right behind Paddy Pimblett, and you don't hear anybody saying he deserves a title shot. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I like Paddy, but I just don't think he's quite there yet, and I think that's why Dana seemed like he was a little bit skeptical of that one. He's like, I don't know. I didn't really like that. What's up, guys? Sorry to interrupt the podcast real quick, but we have a message for you guys.
If you enjoy the Her Hamburg's content, you want to see more, consider subscribing to the channel, leaving a like on the videos, all sorts of fight content as much as possible, podcasts, interviews, vlogs. We have it all over here, so thank you. Appreciate it.
We appreciate you, and like he said, please subscribe. And now, back to the show. But,
yeah.
You know, when you move on to the next fight, though, I think that the future there is pretty clear, as we'll get to. But to talk about the fight itself, Alexandre Pantoja shows that there's levels to this game against Kai Kara France. Dominated him in every way. Wins via submission, rear naked choke in the third round. And, you know, as I think I've said probably now for every Alexandre Pantoja fight, as he, you know, before he was champion and even now as champion, this dude is just so good all around. I mean, he's a really technical striker. Yeah. He's really good on the ground in terms of wrestling and jiu-jitsu. You know, he's the type of guy that I don't worry about it if he's on top or on his back, because I think that he has the skill to submit a guy anywhere.
That was one of those performances that felt like a seminar in championship mixed martial arts. Just straight up, if you want to be the best in the world and prove and keep your spot at the top, then you embrace every single aspect of MMA the way Alexander Pantoja has and does and continues to do. Because when you got a striker like Kai Kara France across from you like that, and you have to stifle all those kinds of strikes from every angle that he can throw with the power behind it, and you do that by just constant position changing, leg locks and arm locks, the body locks, and just constantly, Kai Kara France is just left to do nothing but defend, and then still finish the fight.
It's pretty incredible.
It is.
I mean, Kai Kara France had nothing to offer him. I would say a couple minutes into the first round, you kind of felt that way. You're like, oh, this is a mismatch. Like, Pantoja just looked so confident in there, and there was no weakness in his game, and it was really fun to watch. And I love watching a great champion show people how great they really are. And Pantoja, statistically, I mean, he's beating every single one of Demetrius Johnson's record. And me and you were talking a little before the show, like, this is a guy you have to argue like he could be the greatest flyweight of all time already. And it's tough because to me, and I think anyone who's ever watched Mighty Mouse like in his prime, it's tough to say that somebody's better than him, because I think that in terms of just like pure martial arts, I think that Mighty Mouse might be the best example of somebody who's blended it together in the best way.
But I mean,
But it's like,
after
statistically,
this performance from Pantoja,
I think Pantoja's had better competition. I will say that.
yeah.
And me and you've had we've had debates about like Mighty Mouse and kind of comparing him to Inoue in boxing. People being unsure of like the quality of competition. It's not like Mighty Mouse was fighting bums. I mean, he was fighting really good fighters, but I think the level of the flyweight division has risen so much since then, and Pantoja's still running through all these guys. Former champions, top contenders, young prospects, everybody, and then you look at what's going to be his next fight, versus Joshua Van, who just upset the number one contender in Brandon Royval. He just keeps getting tough test after tough test, and I don't know who beats this guy. I don't know if Joshua Van can do it either. I think it'll be a fun fight because I think Van is a dog, but Pantoja, he proved it once again that there's levels to this game, and right now at flyweight, I don't know who touches this guy. I really don't, and. I don't know. Do you want to talk more about this fight, or do you kind of want to get into the next one a little bit? Because obviously they both kind of relate.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's cool that sometimes like you'll have a card where there's multiple fights in the division, so like it's an important night for a division in particular. But I don't know how often they put the fights back to back, like these two. So
yeah, the way it worked out was actually pretty good because obviously Joshua Van upsets Brandon Royval, wins via unanimous decision, 130-27, which honestly kind of mind-boggling. 229-28, which I thought was better.
What the hell? How does it?
Yeah,
look, the judging was actually good.
No, it was good. That one was a bit.
But how
crazy
does one guy watch that amazing of a fight?
Yeah, I don't get how you score that 30-27, but I mean, I still think Van versus Royval, I think that's a clear candidate for fight of the year so far. One of the best fights, honestly, of the past few years, in my opinion, the way that those guys were going at it on the feet. I think going into the third round, they had already set like multiple records in terms of significant strikes.
You know what it is? Yeah. Maybe that first round, maybe a little bit of the second round. That first round for sure, Joshua Van dominated.
I think it might have been round 2 because Royval outlanded Joshua Van a lot because this fight, the real story of this fight was Brandon Royval's pressure and combinations versus Joshua Van's counters. And I think Joshua Van was landing a lot of clean counters that really were doing damage to Royval. But Royval was handling it so well, and he would come back and land like a 3 to 4 punch combination. But they weren't really doing much to halt Joshua Van's counter striking, and I think that at the end of the day, that, and then obviously Joshua Van's knockout at the end of the third round, I think that really kind of solidified the win for him. It was just a great fight. I mean, it was an absolute war. Both guys got their win bonuses, which I thought was really cool for the UFC to do, because I think Royval, even though he lost that fight, that's not a fight where you walk away from it thinking that a guy lost.
That fight could have ended sooner, honestly, than it did. I mean, it did for Royval. I mean, it didn't end in a finish at all. But for Roy, like, there were, because you had the knockdown, like you said, in the third round. But like I said too, with the first round, Joshua Van. I mean, it was either Brandon Royval had to engage and Josh Van would counter, or if Brandon Royval doesn't engage and fights off the back foot, then Josh Van is gonna engage for him. And but Royval really turned it around in the second round, and then the third round was anybody's game.
It was crazy because Joe Rogan kind of said this too, and I really thought about it. And in a way, it was kind of true. I guess maybe not with the 30-27 card, but when I was watching the fight and Van dropped Royval in the third round, and Joe was like, that genuinely could have just decided the fight. And I was like, Yeah, like that's how close this is. Like now that Van dropped him, like that probably just won him the round. And that could have won him the fight because I think it's 1-1.
Yeah.
And that unbelievable. I mean, that was unbelievable.
Definitely
You can't
unbelievable.
ask for a better
Especially
fight.
when you think of how quick this turnaround is for Joshua Van.
Yeah,
It's
3 weeks.
it's almost like he just became the number one contender overnight.
No,
I mean,
he did. I
he
mean,
did, but who, before his last fight before this, I mean, nobody was thinking Josh Van would be
no.
the next guy up.
I mean,
So
people definitely knew he was pretty good, but it wasn't nobody thought that a few months from that point he was going to be, the clear number one contender. And obviously after the fight, after the Pantoja fight, Joshua Van and Pantoja faced off in the cage, and that's going to be an amazing matchup. I really think that the UFC did a great job with hyping this one up. When you think about our conversation last week, kind of talking about the UFC's promotional abilities lately, I think that they did a really good job on this card for setting themselves up in the future, especially for the flyweight division, because when they had Pantoja and Van face off in the cage, I was like, whew, here we go. Like, I'm excited. I can't wait. Like, I can't wait to see these guys fight.
yeah, it's something about that this year at least with the pay-per-views because whatchamacallit. So you had Amanda Nunes facing off Kayla Harrison. Okay, at least from what I remember recently, it used to be they would just pan to the fighter in the crowd whenever a call out or something happened. The fighter wouldn't actually step in the cage as much as I feel like it's happening now.
Yeah, it was a little more rare. Like, they've done it, obviously. Like, remember when Brock Lesnar pushed DC, and then even before that, the most iconic, I think, stepping in the cage moment.
If it
GSP,
yeah.
I'm not impressed with your performance. The classic. But,
So
yeah, you definitely haven't seen it lately.
It's coming back a lot more often.
Yeah, I like it, though, man. It hypes up the
I
fights.
like
It gets
it
people
too,
excited.
yeah.
You know the energy that comes out of that, man? Because I'll say this, before the Joshua Van fight, I really didn't like the energy in that arena. It felt like it was really quiet. Not as quiet as like an Apex card or something like that, but it didn't have that big fight feel, at least in terms of like the way that the crowd sounded. I think that everybody was excited, don't get me wrong, but I'm saying like I remember watching a lot of pay-per-views where you hear the crowd throughout the whole night, even the prelims.
Yeah, and it makes total sense too because any of these fighters, when even obviously if it's just a face-off, you're not actually gonna fight in that moment. But when they step through that cage and you're facing off with someone that you're going to fight, you're not gonna like for a few weeks or however many months until the fight. Like it's like a switch turns, and now they're just facing off, and you can just.
And you really don't know what's gonna happen. Like obviously they're professionals.
Yeah, like you said,
but
Brock Lesnar shoving DC. All
yeah,
that,
like you really don't know. Like anything could happen in there. Like I remember Strikeforce when Nick Diaz and like all of his team they fought. Oh, God, whose team was it? It was like Strikeforce in Nashville, and they got into like a huge brawl after the fight. Like they were gonna try and hype up another matchup, and then Nick Diaz, Jake Shields, and Nate they fought a whole other team. That was a disaster.
That's one hell of a trio right there.
Yeah, that was the classic Strikeforce. I miss Strikeforce, man. Strikeforce was cool.
That like screams just bleed.
Like when I first got into the UFC, I remember Sean gave me like a whole list of fights to watch on UFC Fight Pass, and the first one he told me to watch was Nick Diaz versus Paul Daly in Strikeforce. And ever since then, I just have this big spot in my heart for Strikeforce, and like, I wasn't a fan yet when it was at like its peak, but I wish it was still there because Strikeforce was awesome. But yeah, I mean, in terms of back to the UFC's promotional skills, though, I do think that Van and Pantoja facing off in the cage definitely hyped up a lot of people because you get a fight of the year type of fight between Van and Royval, and then Pantoja dominates Cara France. And then you see this guy who just won the fight of the year versus this really dominant flyweight champion, and then they're facing off in the cage. Like, how could you not be excited for that as a real MMA fan? And yeah, considering what we were saying last week, I think that was really fun promo, and I'm excited, man. I can't wait to see that fight, genuinely.
Yeah.
But, unless you have anything else, I'm down to move on to the other couple of fights here on the main card.
Yes, shout out. How many times have we really said this year that we have a fight of the year contender? To be honest, you know what I'm saying?
There's
Like,
been a couple, but
there's been a
there's never been
couple,
like,
but this
yeah,
one didn't have it. Where so much so where both guys got their win bonus, and it seems
right.
like a consensus thing right now
And it
amongst
was a big
fans.
fight.
Yeah,
Like a lot of the fight of the year candidates that we've had so far were like on the prelims of a card that like the hardcores were watching, but the casual fans aren't going to know about this fight. You know, this was different because you have the number one contender of a division versus a really hyped up prospect taking the fight on short notice, but you know that the prospect is really good, and then you
yeah,
get a war like that. I think that in terms of what this fight meant for the division, combined for what we got inside the cage, I think that that's personally to me, that's why I think that this is clear fight of the year. Um, yeah, it was awesome, super entertaining. This whole card was entertaining, man. I mean, even I know some people were kind of dogging this next fight because obviously it wasn't as exciting as some of the other fights on the card. But Beneil Dariush versus Renato Moicano. Dariush returns after a couple of years against Moicano, wins unanimous decision. All three judges scored at 29-28, which I think was pretty fair. I think that was an easy scorecard. Dariush comes back from that early knockdown at the end of the first round, dominates the rest of the fight. And honestly, even in the first round, I think he was winning it up until the point that he got dropped. But, you know, that was a pretty big knockdown. You can't really discount that. But Dariush just looked a step ahead in there almost the entire fight. I thought his kicks looked really good because with Dariush, I usually think about his hands, but I thought his kicks looked really good in there. And in terms of obviously his jiu-jitsu against a guy like Renato Moicano to be able to do what he was doing in there on the ground, I was very impressed with how Dariush handled himself against Moicano there. And, you know, he gets back into the win column. And, you know, this is a guy who's not too far removed from an 8-fight win streak, you know what I mean?
yeah.
He's still near the top of the division. Like I said, he's only ranked one spot behind Paddy Pimblett, who just went in the cage yesterday and faced off with the champion. So it's not like he's that far. I still think I think he's one fight away from really being in the title contention because he's very exciting. I mean, think about the UFC meme that you always see, right? Of Joe Rogan, DC, and John Anik when Joe is just like, and like that famous reaction. That's from a Beneil Dariush fight. Nobody remembers that. That's a Beneil Dariush fight that they were reacting from. Or, you know, when he knocked out Jakar Close, that was a
Wow.
crazy, crazy fight. But then a crazy knockout, and that's what bred one of the most famous MMA memes of all time, I think. So let's not forget what Beneil Dariush has contributed to this sport. But in terms of the fight, you know, obviously Moicano just fought for the title against Islam Makhachev a few months ago. So for Dariush to come back and get this win over Moicano, very impressive. Very impressive.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think all that Benil praise is most certainly warranted, and I think he needed this more than Renato Moicano did for sure. Um, so hopefully it doesn't take him much longer. Like you kind of what you said, one more fight, and then he's really back into the thick of it because he has been around for a while. I don't know. I forget how old he is exactly, unless you know.
36.
36 exactly. So he's getting up there in age, and the guy is. I mean, you know, this lightweight division has always been like most certainly been a gauntlet for his entire career. So, and he's always been on the cusp of this title shot. So, um, you know, hopefully sooner rather than later he's actually gonna get it. But Renato Moicano just looked definitely like a step behind, and I'm not trying to take away anything from Vanille Dariush, but I figured Renato Moicano would kind of be able to weather like at least the grappling a little more, and outside of that knockdown he had towards the end of the first round, uh,
Yeah, I was surprised by that.
Renato
I thought that was
Moicano
going to be more
looked, I
competitive.
don't know, yeah, Renato Moicano looked like very, yeah, just kind of a step behind and looked like maybe wasn't entirely ready for this fight. And I don't know what you could really say from this point going forward. It's like when you fight Islam Makhachev and you get finished as soon as he did, like there's no way you could be the same after that. And hopefully, obviously, it's not for the worse. And that you know that fight is, but that's not even his most recent fight anymore. So it's how he rebounds from this fight now. But I really hope Renato Moicano doesn't go on a big skid now after after this, and he can turn it around sooner rather than later, and just keep his name floating around in the top 10. Because
He's a fun guy.
yeah, he's
You
a
want him
fun
to stay.
guy.
You want him to stick
Exactly.
around.
Money Moicano.
I was laughing when he was making fun of Vanille before the fight, talking because they're both 36, which is crazy because Renato Moicano, like you don't think that he's a 36-year-old, but he's been around for so long. But it's kind of like that same thing that we've talked about in the past with like Jose Aldo. Like, he's not that old either, but he was in the UFC for so long that you just feel like he's old. But it's funny because he was making fun of Dariush for having like white hair, gray and white hair. And he's like, man, he goes, we're both old, but you're really old. Like, it's kind of funny.
That's
So
funny.
he's a fun guy. I think everybody
Yeah.
likes Money Moicano. And even, I think that a lot of hardcores, though, I think they like Beneil Dariush too because he's the type of guy who's always been a dark horse at lightweight. He has such a well-rounded skill set. And, in this fight, he really proved it, especially off of a long layoff. He said he didn't really feel very sharp. He thought his timing was off throughout the whole fight. And it's like, if he thought his timing was off and he did that,
Yeah,
I mean,
well,
come on.
that's what I'm saying, man. So, yeah, I think it could go both ways. That Neil Dariush is still very much capable of fighting any of these top contenders and proving he belongs in there. But Renato Moicano is one of just his more weaker performances that at least I've seen to this
Yeah.
point. And
He's a bit of a dud.
yeah, let's hope he doesn't go on like a legit skid here now after this.
I think everybody would probably agree with you on that one. Although with Dariush, now that he's looking upwards, I would love to see him fight Dan Hooker. I think that fight would be such a battle because Dan Hooker is a completely different type of fighter than Beneil Dariush is. I think that, than Renato Moicano is. I think that Dariush would have to work a lot harder to get Dan Hooker to the ground. And I personally think that would be a war. I really think that would be. So I hope that they book that fight. Obviously, Beneil Dariush, he's a pretty humble guy. I think that's why he's kind of a dark horse. He's not the type of guy who's going to talk crap about anybody. He's very respectful, and I think a lot of fighters respect him too. So hopefully he gets a big fight next because I think he deserves it. He's had a few big fights too. You have to give him that, but I think he deserves another coming off this win. But speaking of another interesting fight on the main card, Peyton Talbott versus Felipe Lima. That was a really fun one. And I really just enjoyed watching Peyton Talbott go to work in there because, we already know how good this guy can be on the feet as a striker. But in terms of, when you think about his last fight, right, against Raoni Barcelos, who I think is a really good fighter in itself. Like, a lot of people are like, oh, Peyton Talbott got fraud checked. But I was like, Barcelos, he's a dog. People don't realize that. And I think that this fight kind of proved that a little more because Felipe Lima was another guy who's pretty hyped up. And I said this to you before. I think that it was interesting that they even booked this fight because you don't usually see the UFC book two, highly touted prospects against each other this early in their careers. But Talbot faces off against Felipe Lima and then shows insane improvements on the ground. And, like, not just improvements, but, like, insane improvement. Like, in 5 months to get that much better with takedown defense and offensive grappling, that was just incredible to me. And, we were texting each other throughout that fight. Like, this is just insane to watch because it's like you're watching a different fighter. And it's not like it's been 2 years since he lost to Barcelos. It's been 5 months. So to watch him do that against another really good fighter in Lima, I thought that was really intriguing. It's weird because on the feet, which you'd think would be Talbot's strength, I thought Lima was actually getting the better of those exchanges, but...
Yeah, but even that, at least in the last round, Peyton...
Oh, yeah, the last round was dominant.
Yeah, the last round was straight dominance. Like...
But I don't think that was a technical thing. I think that was more of like a power type of thing. Because I think Lima even said it to his corner that like, because they were like, stand with him, like you're doing well on the feet. He's like, no, like this guy has power. Like he's hitting me hard. Like I feel it.
He has power, but the way he used that jab and then to set up the heel, was it a spinning heel kick? I know it was a heel kick. I think it was a spinning.
You're talking about Talbot, right? Yeah, I remember that. That was nice.
That was absolutely amazing, and that right there could have dropped Felipe. So, yeah.
I mean, they both landed some good shots. I mean, Lima landed a few spinning back fists. And I was like, damn, Peyton just took that. But on the ground is like, that's what I'm saying. Like the spot where it was the most spread apart in terms of the skill level is like the last place that I expected it to be in terms of like, because I wouldn't have thought that Peyton Talbott was going to out grapple Felipe Lima like that, especially when you look at his last fight. So to me, like just to watch a guy improve that much, I think that it kind of reinforces my personal belief in him, because I think after the Barcelos fight, a lot of people kind of said that Peyton Talbott is a bit of a fraud, too much too early. But I was like, I think that he just ran into a guy who's really underrated. And
you're always going to have those people that see the hype train and are just dying to, at the first chance, to claim a fraud.
I always love when fighters do that to another fighter and then they lose. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I saw it, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, Andre Petrosky, who I like, he was talking about Bo Nickel getting fraud checked, and then he just got like destroyed by Edmund Shabazi, and I'm like, well, you just talked all like, yeah, like, oh, now what is that? That's right, exactly. What does that mean about you? But yeah, I don't know. I just try not to buy into that like collective hate towards people. You know what I mean? Because I try to look at the fights themselves and like what I see as someone who's watching, and on the feet, Peyton Talbott is really technical. Although, like I said, in this fight, it wasn't his best performance in terms of striking. It wasn't that bad either. But in terms of his one major weakness, which was grappling, I can't remember a time where I've seen this much improvement in one fight that's like less than a year apart. Because, Talbott against Barcelos had nothing in terms of the grappling. And in this fight, like I said, it wasn't just defensively, even offensively, Peyton Talbott was doing really well on the ground. And it's just, that blew my mind. When I was watching that fight, I was actually shocked. I wasn't shocked that he was winning. I was just shocked that he was winning in the way that he was winning. And to me, like I said, it reinforces my belief in him, and I can't wait to see what's next for him. I know he called out Adrian Yanez. I think that would be an interesting fight. I think on the feet, they're pretty evenly matched, actually, so that could be another war that we get sometime soon.
This guy's on the fast track to the top, and the good thing is he's not actually being fast tracked by UFC.
Yeah, I think they've matched him up pretty well so far. Like, even the Barcelos fight, like I knew that was going to be a tough fight for him, but I didn't think that it was like so egregious that I was like, oh, they shouldn't even book them. I think that they've been smart with him so far, because they're not like giving him cans, but they're also not like rushing him to the top like they have with certain other fighters. So I kind of respect that. But yeah, I mean, this whole main card was awesome. Even the prelims were really awesome. I enjoyed watching those. I mean, Gregory Rodriguez sent Jack Hermanson to fucking Pluto. Like, that was insane.
Yeah.
Herb Dean fault, as
Derek
Lewis says.
Hermanson did not need to take that last strike on the ground. I mean, that's got to stop with these refs just letting that happen. Bro.
Yeah, and I saw people kind of crapping on Gregory Rodriguez for that. I'm like, that's not his fault.
Yeah, that's his fault. What?
It's like that fight should have been stopped the second he was falling.
They can't tap. They're not capable at all of tapping themselves into a fighter's psyche for just a second.
Well, forget the psyche. I mean, the rule set that refs tell you to fight until the ref pulls you off. Like, it doesn't matter if somebody looks like they're unconscious. If the ref doesn't stop the fight, it doesn't matter.
But if they don't understand that part, then they're expecting the fighter to just stand there and like, oh, he's out, ref. Can you stop the fight? Or do I have to keep... It's like, that's the ref's fault. 100%. And
was it Anthony Smith that Khalil Roundtree was fighting? Remember, I think it was Anthony Smith when he dropped him, and it was so bad, and like Smith was just stumbling, and Khalil was just standing over him, like waiting to hit him with one more big shot, and then the ref stopped it. I always remember that finish. I think it was against Anthony Smith.
Exactly. That's what people were expecting. Like, almost hold it there, but don't wait it go until the
ref. And then the media, like, I hate how they ask Gregory Rodriguez, like, was that shot necessary? I'm like, they didn't stop the fight. I was like, what do you want him to do? Like, I get it. He looks like he's unconscious, but like Herb Dean should have gotten there faster. That's his fault. It's not Gregory Rodriguez's fault.
Bullshit.
I thought of Masvidal. I'm like, it was super necessary. It was super necessary. But
that was amazing. That
was a great knock. I love watching RoboCop fight. I've said this many times. In terms of guys who like aren't near like a title shot, who are just people in that gatekeeper kind of status in the division. Gregory Rodriguez is probably one of my favorite fighters to watch in terms of that level of, opponents, or in terms of that level of fighters. But even besides that, I mean, there were a couple of really good performances, like two great finishes that I wanted to highlight as well. Jose Miguel Delgado, that 26-second knockout, puts himself on the map. That was a really interesting one. Terrence McKinney, me and you were laughing about that one on the way back from the beach because Slava Claus was, his legs were shaking so violently, just like this. We were both saying like that's what someone looks like when they're getting strangled. Yeah. That was hilarious.
It's like he was learning how to swim or something, like synchronized swimming or something like that.
But he's kicking his legs.
T-Rex.
Yeah, T-Rex 155. I love that guy, though. He's so fun to watch. He's another guy who every time he's on a card, I always...
I still have the screenshot of Slava Claus in his hat on after the fight.
You have to send me that, immediately after. Yeah. I have to put that in the video, because that was funny. I don't know who thought that was a good idea to put that hat on him after just getting brutally submitted. But a lot of good things. I mean, even Tracy Cortez getting her first win since September of 2023. Crazy that it's been that long.
Yeah.
Because Tracy's a really good fighter. That was fun to watch her get back in her winning ways. But yeah, I mean, overall, I thought that this card was a really, really good one. I think nowadays it's rare to see a fight night that kind of is really fun to watch from start to finish. And pay-per-views, same thing. I think you always kind of get like a few duds in there, but this card from start to finish really was just a treat, and I enjoyed watching every second of it.
Yeah, they call it the bathroom break fights for certain cards and pay-per-views and stuff. This had absolutely none of that. This is one of the best pay-per-views we've gotten in quite some time. Quite a long time.
Yeah, it felt big, and it lived up to the hype that I think that it was given, and I'm glad that it was given that hype, because it should have been given that hype, Big fights, a lot of great fighters on this card from start to finish, and a lot of really entertaining matchups.
17 gets in. Oh, yeah.
It was funny, I was thinking that before I was looking at the shirt, and I'm like, I gotta get that in there somehow. I didn't know how I was gonna do it. So, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was...
Oh, no. Yeah. I don't know if that's going to come up on the audio, but I didn't like that sound. It might,
to be honest, but...
Jesus. I'm going to have to check that out after, but... Anyway, next week, there's no UFC card. We're still going to try and get a video up if we can. Stay tuned for that. We have a couple of ideas. Hopefully one of them will work out. But yeah, so stay tuned for that. Thank you guys for watching. Subscribe if you enjoyed. And until next time. Actually, before we go, I just saw the book in my peripherals. So if you guys have been MMA fans for a while, you guys probably know Marc Raimondi. He used to cover MMA for ESPN. He still works for ESPN, but now he covers the Atlanta Falcons. He's outside of the game in terms of mixed martial arts now. But, in terms of inspirations, at least for me personally, Marc Raimondi is always somebody I've looked up to. And when I went to college, one of my journalism professors, Dr. Hershon, shout out to him, he connected me with Marc because he went to St. John's with him. And Marc has been just an amazing resource for me, trying to find my way in this MMA media world. And I'm lucky enough that I can really hit him up like whenever I want for advice or even just to talk. He's a really cool guy, and he's a great reporter. Wrote a great book here. I didn't finish it yet, but I think this. I'm not a huge pro wrestling guy, but I'm a few chapters into the book so far, and I'm really enjoying it, learning about the NWO. And the whole book is about kind of, that story, how they rose to fame, what they meant to, American culture, to just society in general. And, I know he's been working on this for a really long time. I've known Marc since 2023. And when me and Marc first met, he had already been working on this book for a couple of years. And it's 2025 now. I think he's been working on the book since 2021. So a lot of hard work getting put into this. And I think even if you're not into pro wrestling, I still think that this is worth a read. It's, like I said, for me, who's not a pro wrestling fan, really interesting so far. And I know that this guy is one of the best reporters in the business. And I know he put a lot of hard work into it. So if you're into pro wrestling or if you want to learn more about the NWO, definitely get his book, Say Hello to the Bad Guys. I would imagine you could probably buy it anywhere, bookstores. I bought it off Amazon personally. But yeah, great guy, great reporter. I'm sure that the rest of this book is going to be fantastic, and I encourage you guys to get it and support him because he's a great dude. So yeah, get the book, subscribe if you enjoyed the episode, and until next week, we'll see y'all.
Feel just like a superstar. Doing all these drugs, I don't think I'm gonna see tomorrow. Living fast, brand new dash up in a foreign car. It's the type of shit that you be doing when you going hard.